That's long been with us, this idea of like an increasing personal AI assistant or companion, but no one's yet been able to deliver that. The last thing I'll say is the key is that's another sort of thing that's going to be paramount in this new age. It then puts a company like us in a pretty good position to deliver a deeply personal AI experience.
Welcome to a new episode of XR and AI Spotlight, the show where we give the stage to the founders and makers shaping the future of XR and AI. My name is Gabriele Romagnoli, I'm your host, and I'm here today with Bobak Tavangar. Bobak is the co-founder of Brilliant Labs, a Singapore-based startup that launched to market Frame, a lightweight AR glasses powered by AI. In a space that is getting ever more crowded, there is one thing that sets Frame apart. It is completely open source. By listening to this episode, you will learn what is Frame, Noah, the AI agent, and what are some of the interesting applications that developers are building on top of this open hardware and software platform.
The way that Noah works today, there's a base model, and that base model, its job is to understand the intention of what comes at it. It then does something called function calling. It needs to decide what is the right tool for the job. We have developers from various industries, healthcare, education, government. They're building all kinds of really interesting applications.
What is the current status of the wearable AI tech? And what makes Frame stand out?
There have been large companies, and you could call it sort of brute forcing the market, and each one pushing a little bit further. First it was Google, and then Snap, and now Facebook or Meta. The Meta Ray-Bans validated the hypothesis that people are okay wearing a camera on their face.
Bobak's take on how media and influencers reacted to the release of the Rabbit R1 and the Humane AI Pin.
On the one hand, people, they say they love innovation and experimentation, and they want to celebrate startup culture. And on the other hand, the internet's become a bit like, the old coliseums of Roman times. And I don't know how healthy that is. It's feeling a bit like old Rome before the fall.
And the two reasons why Brilliant Lab is betting its future in open source.
Open source is foundational for us. And that's for two reasons. Number one, on principle, all of these technologies are new. They are going to be world changing. It's important for these things to be open, not just inspectable, verifiable, but also modifiable. But the second reason is very much strategic.
But before we get into it, I wanted to thank our sponsor, Meshy, who made this episode possible. Meshy is a real powerhouse for generating 3D assets with AI. You can start with a simple text or image prompt and get high-quality, stylized model in just a minute. One feature that I personally love is the ability to create stylized textures for any mesh, with or without UV, and since the release of Meshing 2.5, pro users can even edit only section of the generated textures with just a text prompt. Try it out, go to meshy.ai, start the 7 days trial, and after that, use the code XRAI20 to get 20% off your subscription. And now, it's time to roll the title and welcome Bobak under the spotlight. Bobak, it is a pleasure to have you here.
Great to be with you, Gabrielle. Thanks for having me.
So as I said, this space is getting crowded. There are many more devices that have the promise of augmenting our life. So I would like to start not from the hardware, but from how a day in the life of a Frame user looks like. So can you give us an impression of how a day in the life of a typical Frame user looks like?
Yeah, well, right now, Frame is totally open source. Our whole platform is. And I think the early customer base for a device like this is, despite its thinness, affordability, it's still going to be largely developers. And so we have developers from various industries, healthcare, education, government, of course, the AI space is a big one. And they're building all kinds of really interesting applications to serve people who might want to wear a device like this. So it could be a doctor or a nurse or an EMT. It could be a teacher or a student. It could be a marine biologist or someone doing inspection and maintenance or repair out in the field or in a factory. a lot of folks who are interested in sort of deploying a custom, on the job learning type of app onto Frame for employees that are engaged in all kinds of sort of frontline activities. So it really does depend on the specific domain and what folks are doing. But I can tell you that right now we're under no illusion that, hey, despite again how thin and affordable this is, that this is going to conquer the mass market today. I think there's still a bit of time before these devices are ready to do that, and before the mass market is seeing the value on the table to get their heads around, buying this and inviting it into their lives. So it's still early. So that's definitely how we think about it.
I really appreciate the honesty here, because usually when we hear about these new devices that uses AI in some shape or form, it's always uh, positioned as something that everybody can wear tomorrow, that can do magic. So I really appreciate the honesty here. And also, you also bring up another point. I've got recently another interview where people were saying, well, also the Vision Pro is a glorified dev kit. And that is actually very true to some extent. When you see a lot of people that are currently using the device more often, are actually using it to develop content. So the point is that I love this idea of having a platform that anybody can use to shape then a specific use case that might be relevant for them, right? So when we go a bit deeper into the hardware, right, I see that there are two, unlike the, for example, the Ray-Ban, right, from Meta. In your case, there are two ways, as if I understood, the frame communicates back to the user, right? One through visuals and one through audio. So, can you maybe tell us a little bit how also developers are using these two ways for the frame to communicate back to the user? When is that the visual makes sense? When does the audio make sense? Can you give us some example?
Yeah, so there's a display optic in front of the eyes, and we use a pretty simple geometric prism. It's high yield off the production line, cost effective, and so that's why we chose that technology on the optics. That'll give about a 20-degree diagonal field of view, sort of heads up display, and you can show text, you can do graphics, emoji. There's a vector and graphics engine that we've written ourselves directly on the FPGA of the device. The developers can have all kinds of fun sort of customizing the canvas of what's displayed in front of someone's eyes. And then, of course, images. You can bring images in front of the eye as well. And then there is no microphone, or sorry, there's no speaker. There is a microphone, but no speaker in frame. And the reason is so many of us have AirPods, as I'm wearing right now. And we just felt that a lot of the speaker technology today is bulky and power consumptive. There's some next generation stuff, solid state speakers, et cetera, that we have our eye on for future hardware. And that's more power efficient. It's less prone to mechanical failure. And more critically, it is really, small in terms of the package size. So we don't need to make the arms really bulky and thick and sort of heavy, let alone all the power draw on the batteries. By having that stuff in there, we can just make use of AirPods or other true wireless headphones. So assuming that someone has that, Noah, our AI assistant, can begin to speak responses up to the ear. So, if you sort of imagine it for a moment, while wearing frame, you could be walking down the street, see something really interesting, ask Noah, and Noah would respond to you in sort of a lovely narrated voice. In the future, our vision for how it should feel interacting with an AI is one part audio, one part visual. And so we often give this, analogy of when most of us were children, our parents would read storybooks to us in the evening. This is before, I guess, we were literate and we could read them for ourselves. And so, you would look at the pictures and you would hear your parent kind of read the words and narrate the story to you. So while your mind was engaged with the story, you would also have a visual reference point that complemented that. And that's very much our vision for how it should feel to interact with an AI assistant that sees what you see and hears what you hear through this device.
Yeah, and I the point still remains for me in the sense like when is that based on your experience? Because there is this aggressive pursuit of having digital content displayed in front of us. And this represents a lot of challenges, right? Due to the technology of the lenses, of the clarity, the transparency, the light, the issues that you have in bright light conditions. Now, based on your experience building this hardware, I was just like, when is that you realize made more sense to have a visual? What is that just audio cannot do? Is there some example that you have seen being particularly relevant in your developer community?
Yeah, I mean, audio is powerful, of course. But visual, we think about some things like image generation. So we are bullish on image generation as a creative and even just fun, whimsical tool at your disposal to be able to reconfigure what you see in front of your eyes and iterate on that and share it with others. So kind of playing with your reality a little bit. And so, I think that's sort of a really tangible, sort of delightful way to play with reality using AI. And having that in front of the eyes is compelling. So, there's that sort of bucket of things. And then, of course, there's what might come up from, the app on your phone. And for developers, that'll look any which way, but it could be images and text, things rendered in front of the eye that are processed, by the cloud or down on your phone, that it's helpful to see in front of the eye to complement what's being said to you. So, maybe like a step-by-step, a diagram, or, you're trying to repair a car tire, you're trying to debug something, you're trying to work through a process or cook a meal. And it's always helpful to see a visual of that, a step-by-step, a visual indication of, hey, this is what it should look like when it's correct. And this often what it looks like when it's not correct. Things like that help not just tell you, but also show you. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. And so we think that both give you that whole sensory experience.
And I believe that actually I do have here a little clip of a frame that I want to share to people before we continue on with the conversation. So let me just play it out so that people can give it a look. So we have seen in the short clip some of the things that we discussed already, but one that we just glazed over is the AI capability, right? So how do the glasses interfaces with AI? What model do they use? You mentioned about Noah. Can you tell us more about this? And also, how does that reflect with the open source model that you are building upon?
Totally. So maybe I'll start with the second question, then work backward into the AI side. So open source is foundational for us. And that's for two reasons. Number one, on principle, all of these technologies are new. They are going to be world changing. And I think it's at such an early stage that neither we nor any of us who uses them or builds with them can fathom how they're going to be changing the world over the next 5, 10, years and beyond. So at the very get-go, we think it's important for these things to be open. Not just inspectable, verifiable, but also modifiable, because AI is going to be intelligent, and therefore it's going to be proactive and useful in all sorts of new ways. And that means it opens up many use cases that we've just not been able to cater to before with technology, especially personal technology, which is embodied. So having it open means that every individual can potentially have recourse to localize this technology to meet very, very specific use cases. Even if it's just a use case of one, this technology is becoming powerful enough to localize it to that extent. And so being open affords that. And so, that's one reason. It's the principle of it. But the second reason is very much strategic. We think that we're in an era now where developers, customers, they want more reciprocity from the platform provider. And I think in the last, 10, 20 years, we've seen a lot of incredible stuff at the hardware software integration, but it's all been closed or it's not been fully open across both software and hardware. And so that's always kept people at arm's length in terms of what they can do and how they can understand what's going on inside the black box. We think that, in 2024 and beyond, that has to change. And we think that people's appetites are ready for that. So, to build an ecosystem around that, I think is a way that we can zig where many others who came before us went to zag. And so it's a differentiator. Now, on the AI side, of course, we open source the hardware, but we also open source software, and that includes Noah, the AI assistant. And so Noah today, it's actually funny. When we started building Noah, it integrated with GPT-3, and it was exciting. It was all new. But now we're on GPT-4o, and Claude 3, and Perplexity is out, and it's great. And the space has been moving so fast. Part of it has been us developing Noah, but part of it's also just been us keeping up with new models as they come out. Another facet of this, of course, is what's going on now with on-device processing on your phone. That I think more of the silicon, whether it's Apple, on their Apple Silicon, or whether it's Qualcomm or others, they're now starting to bring these very powerful models down to do increasingly more on your local device, which can include a phone. And so we're very excited about that because that keeps it local, it pairs with Frame, and it means that it's going to be lower cost for you. It's going to be, lower latency for you. It's better for everyone. So today, Noah really is this pipeline of GPT-4o, Perplexity, and Stable Diffusion. And those are for a few different use cases. They process for translation. They process for reasoning over what you hear, what you see. Of course, the Stable Diffusion side does the image generation in front of your eyes. And then Perplexity is very precise AI web search. So, you could walk into a shop, see a jacket, winter is coming, you could see a jacket, and you could, ask Perplexity, hey, can I get this very jacket somewhere on the web for 30% less than is asking in the shop? And it'll do a precise web search and show you not just whether you can, where you can, and also how you can walk there. So, we just think that a few of these services knit together will provide a whole human experience in terms of what you might want to get done at different moments in the day, let alone being open source for developers to hack and modify and customize this stuff in a whole new range of ways. So that's what it can do today.
So you mentioned a wide variety of models, right, that integrates with the hardware. Is that something, and I'm not sure this is a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is that something that they all work at the same time? Is that something that the developer decide which one for a specific application? How does that all integrate with each other when you have models that are specialized for different things?
It's a great question. So it's a little bit of all of the above. So the way that Noah works today, and we're constantly iterating on it, so that this could change, but there's a base model, and today we use GPT-4o. And that base model, its job is to understand the intention of what comes at it. There might be an image, there might be some audio, text, location data. It's meant to sort of understand and surmise based on what's coming at it and the nature of the question, but also the context of what came before. So maybe this is the fourth in a series of questions, each building on the last. And so that base model needs to make sense of all of that, the context. It then does something called function calling, or other models call it tool selection. But what it boils down to is it needs to decide what is the right tool for the job. Are they trying to generate an image? Are they trying to do something that involves a live web search? Are they trying to reason over what they see or ask a question about history? And so it needs to then choose the right tool for the job. Sometimes, maybe even most of the time, it means GPT-4o itself is capable of answering that question. So it could be the right tool for the job. But if it's not, it knows that, hey, Perplexity is the right tool for this job. Stable Diffusion is the right tool for this job. And, to answer your question, it's an open library. And so developers can change how that works, or they can add new models, and they customize the function calling of the base model to include that new model. So, it could be a new model fine-tuned for, um, parsing and understanding legal documents. So maybe this is a company that wants to, maybe they've been fine-tuning this model. They offer it on a subscription basis to lawyers, to law firms. And so they see an opportunity to integrate that model with Frame and sell this as a package to law firms so that lawyers, while they're sitting at their desks looking through copious documents, as lawyers will do, or PDFs on the screen, then it's that model which is then selected as the tool to ingest what it's taking in, what Frame is taking in, and then give an answer. So that's what's powerful about it being open, is that developers can add new models, and it'll select it as the tool.
That's fascinating because indeed it's not a closed box where you're stuck with one thing. You can then branch out based on the specific application being other models or your own proprietary knowledge that you might have also built in a database or some sort of like tool set that can add on it.
That's right.
We have discussed about open source. Now, open source is a kind of like it's nice, it's noble, and I think it's the way to go. Now, the point is, how do you remain competitive as brilliant labs? How do you remain keep your knowledge? How does that work for you as a startup building hardware?
Yeah. We think a lot about this, and I think the question that we always try to answer for ourselves is, based on how this whole market is shaking out, what parts of the value chain are going to, where will value accrue, and what is the opportunity before us in terms of how we can uniquely or have an early mover advantage to capture. And so for us, our minds are very much on the device that lives in your life, and sort of that array of sensors that are perceiving the world as you perceive it. We think that to date has not been done in a way that is, thin and has decent battery life and is affordable. So that's somewhere where we can contribute. In other words, just doing something that looks like glasses. But then the other part of that is not the model layer, because there's other companies like Anthropic and OpenAI and, that are doing that, and they're doing it very well. But it's actually a layer of abstraction beyond that. It is, once you capture the data from the device, how do you process that data, excuse me, to make your interactions with an AI increasingly personal over time? And I think a lot of people are thinking about that. A lot of us watched the movie Her back in the day with Joaquin Phoenix. That's long been with us, this idea of like an increasingly personal AI assistant or companion. But no one's yet been able to deliver that. And I think it has to be a company that is with you in your life day in, day out, in a way that leaves you hands-free and leaves the device having the first row seat or the first person perspective on your life, in such a way that it's able to be worn and useful, but also, have first-hand access to that data. It then puts a company like us in a pretty good position to deliver a deeply personal AI experience. The key, the last thing I'll say is the key is privacy and trust. And that's another sort of thing that's going to be paramount in this new age. And that's something that we're also thinking a lot about, is how do we differentiate on that basis?
And this is a very good point, because when I use ChatGPT, I feel like I have to start from scratch every time. Like I look, that this is the thing that I need, right? Maybe I'm producing the podcast and I need some way to generate some interesting questions, or maybe look at some past interviews that my guest is gonna went into, right? So he kind of knows things that I need, but every time I feel that I need to start from scratch. This is of course just the tip of the iceberg, right? When we talk about personalized AI, you can think about many aspects of things that you're doing, right? Especially when you wear them, when you can bring this device anywhere. Now, this is a promise, though. What is the first step to move into that direction, right? What needs to happen to start seeing a more integrated AI that still remain compliant with privacy and still build trust with the user?
I think there's a couple of sort of pieces to that puzzle. I think one is, of course, doing hardware that is light and affordable and is useful. And that's certainly the piece of the puzzle that we're trying to really tackle right now, and have some pretty exciting plans around future products as well, to deepen on. I think the next piece is assembling all of the tools to be able to build this personalization engine on the back end to take all of the data that this device is pulling in and be able to synthesize it, to process it in a way that helps a model understand the user on an increasing basis over time, kind of like a compounding asset that's just put to work for you. The more you live life, the better it gets. But I think the third element here is, and this is at least how we think about it, this is the data of your life. It's arguably some of the most precious.
I just wanted to have a quick break to remind you that the recording of these episodes and many more great conversations with incredible experts are available on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Just head over to my profile or in the episode description below and pick the platform you prefer. And now, let's get back to the show.
Intimate data. And so, we believe that a company like us should act kind of like a bank, operating a custodian, as a custodian for your data. And that just like a bank, we put you in, give you the keys. So, we put your data on a server, we give you the keys. It's called Gabrielle's server, and only Gabrielle has the keys to it. And you decide who has access and where does it go and what kind of data sits there. You can, edit it and prune and remove data that you don't feel comfortable being there. But ultimately, you're in control, and only you get to see what's on this server. We can't see what's on it. No one else can, unless you decide to, there's consent here. You decide to give someone else limited access to it. So we think that model is going to be really important, and that anything aside from that model that is trying to say that, you are the product and that we are renting or selling access to your life's data to someone else, that's ultimately not going to be in the interests of the user, or all of us as a species. So that's how we think about it.
So, one thing you also mentioned, and I think is indeed the fact that open source relies on the community. In this case, the development community and the broader aspect of it. What are some examples that people are doing right now with Frame, and maybe how can people get involved that are listening, for example?
We have a pretty vibrant, and I think vibrant's probably downplaying it a little bit, but it's a very vibrant Discord community, very lively. And we have at the point of recording this pod, we have close to 9,000 members of the Discord. Most of them are developers, and folks are sharing what they're building, what they're planning to build. And there's a lot of discourse around the possibilities of the intersection of AI and a wearable AR device like this. But then there's also just our whole team in there giving hands-on technical support. So if there's folks who are trying to get up and running building something and they have questions, not only do we have links to our documentation and a bunch of helpful tutorial videos, but the whole team's on hand. And so, we want to be really high touch with our early customers here who are building stuff for Frame. And ultimately it's the ecosystem, which I think is going to make this something that is useful to a mass market. It's not just one company doing a singular product. So that's sort of, what makes the community aspect so exciting.
And can you share some example of how some of people have been built on Frame right now?
Yeah, so in our Discord, if your listeners are inclined to check us out, there's, a whole sort of channel called projects, and people are listing all the projects they're working on. Some are doing, face recognition. Some are doing, things that are oriented for like end retail or, consumer goods companies, doing translation stuff in niche circumstances. There's all kinds of stuff, folks in the medical field that are looking to sort of recognize what someone's presenting with and give step by step, second opinion or instructions on how to deal with that. And there's all kinds of stuff bubbling up there. So yeah, would definitely encourage folks to check it out.
Nice. I'm also after this certainly gonna go there and check some of, because I actually missed to check the Discord. Probably my my missing. Um, so in this open source model, right? What is currently the business model? How do they cost? How much do they cost? Is that a subscription model attached to it or not? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's pretty plain vanilla. So it's something that people are already used to with consumer electronics, especially if they're Apple customers. Um, there's the one-off hardware sale, and so we, have margin there, and then we have subscriptions over time for sort of pro level access to um, AI services through Noah. That maybe the amount that they want to use it on a monthly basis, it exceeds a free tier. Or there might be newer models, let's say like a GPT-5 or a GPT-6, that are the cutting edge, but quite expensive. And so, we might offer those, but for a monthly subscription, so that we can, the price that we receive from OpenAI, we can then pass that on. And so that becomes a recurring revenue, subscription for us on top of the hardware sale. And then longer term, AI personalization, that's something that takes a lot of compute power that all sits up in the cloud. And so if customers want to opt into that, then that'll also be an opportunity for us to charge on a monthly recurring basis on top of the hardware sale. So in that way, we do hardware and then we sort of scaffold services on top in a way reminiscent of the way that Apple constructs their business model today.
And so how would that actually work with the developer community, right? So in a sense, they build a certain, do they build an app? Do they build a service? And are they able to, how does that work between you, the developers building, and in this case, the end consumer or user? Could be a medical then at that point, right? Could be a law firm, as we discussed. How those three parties play in this business model?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways it can work. So, some companies, one of the advantages of being open source is that some companies, maybe for data privacy reasons, they prefer things on premises. And so it might be just sort of a pure hypothetical here. Maybe it's a bank. Banks tend to be very understandably careful about who has access to what kind of data, and they try to keep that stuff on premises and very carefully ring fenced. So a bank or a company catering to a bank could buy a bunch of our hardware, build a bespoke application for our hardware for Frame, or simply integrate a model into Noah, and then sell that directly to the bank, and that gets distributed across a workforce. But the software is loaded onto each Frame unit locally. And so then there's no sort of centralized access to that from outside the bank's premises. It's all local to the device, and can be updated on a local basis as well. Because we're open and kind of, federated in that regard, we wouldn't require people to, run app approval through us to update that app. And so, that's of course one way, but ultimately we are keen to evolve the way that an app store sort of works. So, today on mobile right now, if you tap an app store icon, it opens up, you have a grid of apps, a little search bar. And there's a lot of sort of, scrolling and complexity, and each of us has a million apps and most of them we don't use. So we actually think that with large language model AI, with generative AI, we have an opportunity to leapfrog where developers who build apps for Frame, Noah would know that these apps exist and that these are the contexts that these apps are pointed toward. So there might be an app that's for translating in a restaurant, when you're looking at a menu. And so when I walk into the restaurant and the menu's in a different language, Noah, through my Frame, might very well proactively suggest to me that, hey, I see that you're looking at a menu, and clearly I know that you're in a new country, and this language is not the language you're familiar with. There's a great app written by a developer named Gabrielle, and people love it for these reasons. If you want, I can update your device and we can be up and running with the app to start translating this menu. So it's something that's contextual, and it's pushed at me in the moment when I need it. I didn't have to go digging around in a million apps or, do all the heavy lift. The model did the heavy lift for me because it has perfect knowledge of what developers have built, and it brings it to you at the right time, at the right place. So we do see an opportunity to make apps discoverable and useful to people in that way.
Very interesting also to again see that as Noah as this hub of knowledge that then kind of like span and connects the different points, right? Because you cannot develop everything, but you can be indeed a bridge for between the user and the rest of the knowledge outside, the rest of the applications that have been built or other more advanced model that will keep improving over time.
Yeah.
Now, I also wanted to kind of like shift the conversation and give a look at how things have moved recently. So we now have, for example, the Ray-Ban from Meta that also are AI powered. We are having other devices like the Humane Pin, like the Rabbit R1, all these wearables to some extent, more or less, that claim they are going to improve our life. So first of all, I want to ask you, have you ever tried any of this, and what was your personal impression, if so?
Yeah, I've tried the Meta Ray Bans and the Rabbit R1. I haven't tried the Humane AI Pin. I mean, I like our general stance on this is we've made our bet on glasses as the form factor. Each company has kind of taken its own different direction on what the form factor should be. For us, it's glasses. But we generally celebrate the originality that we're seeing in consumer electronics. And I think it's been a long time since we've seen that. I think, unfortunately, consumer electronics has more or less looked like, a slab that sits in my pocket, and it kind of looks the same for all of us. And that's not very fun. It's great to see new ideas thrown into the pot. I think some, the market's going to play with this and companies are going to evolve it. We're going to evolve as well. Undoubtedly we test something, we learn from it, we learn from others. I think the Meta Ray-Bans have done a great service to certainly our corner of the market, glasses. They've definitely, I think, validated the hypothesis that people are okay wearing a camera on their face, seeing the world and being seen wearing that camera, because the camera on the Meta Ray-Ban is not inconspicuous. I mean, I think it's two pretty large cameras, but there's a comfort level there, and I think that shows that since Google Glass launched 12 years ago or so, society has seen a shift. I think demographically, certainly, there's more comfort level, but also just there's cameras everywhere now. All of us have phones, and many people have phones constantly recording in each other's faces. So, like it or not, there's become a general comfort level. And I think that Meta has validated that hypothesis. So, we're excited by that.
Wait a second, Bobak. Is that a validation or is that a push? Because that is the other thing, I am not sure about that, and it's not because I want to sound critical. It's I'm not sure how often people, despite the cameras, yes, are not exactly hidden, but they are also not exactly in your face, right? There is not like a blinking light. Hey, I am recording. You could pass by everywhere and just record. Is that like sometimes innovation happens by brute force? And that is not necessarily something we like to hear, but that is also part of the reality. So what's your take on that? Is it
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we're also trying to. I think there's a few reasons for this, but Snap has had the Spectacle outs for a few years. Spectacles 1, 2, 3. I think they're on this 4th generation, and functionality-wise, very similar to the Meta Ray-Bans. It was camera and microphones, no display optics. at least for the first three generations of the spectacles. So it's not like the Meta Ray-Bans were new. And yeah, I think you have a point there that there have been a few. First it was Google, and then Snap, and now Facebook or Meta. There have been large companies, and you could call it sort of brute forcing the market, and each one sort of pushing a little bit further, a little bit further. And we're also trying to understand why the Ray-Bans have been successful relative to the Snap spectacles. And so, it's an interesting question. I do think, though, that in order for this category to truly have liftoff, for it to become on the order of consequence that, iPhone is, or Android, the smartphone, it has to, I think, become a platform. I think it has to evolve to accommodate developer ideas, so that it can look and feel many different ways for the diverse, many different people on the planet. Right now, the Meta Ray-Bans, it's early days, and undoubtedly they have plans in this regard, but right now it's sort of a one-size-fits-all, and it's really tailor-made to integrate with a social network like Instagram. But we're keen to see, how are they going to evolve that, and we certainly have our own plans as well.
So I want to get back 1 second to when you mentioned about the different form factor, right? That being certainly a key differentiator, and I think as you said, it is great to see some innovation, being the Rabbit R1 that has still this handheld form factor, the pin that is something more unique. And then I think that everybody will in the future find out something that fits their needs or their style, and that is great. I think it's fantastic. One thing, though, I've seen is that, and you might have seen also these reviews all over the internet right now, that tends to be overly, let's say, pompous in a way, like, or really in your face of how bad these devices are. And I think a lot of that has not necessarily to do with the form factor. That is, I think it is not necessarily the point that these reviews are making, but it's more about the responsiveness, the false promises. So, what's your take about these reviews and this initial response that the media has on these devices?
It's definitely, sociologically, it's a very interesting time for our web culture collectively, as a species. It's on the one hand, people, they say they love innovation and experimentation, and they want to celebrate startup culture, and hey, just throw it out there and be bold, take risks. And on the other hand, the internet's become a bit like, the old coliseums of Roman times, and I don't know how healthy that is. I think there's a bloodlust out there, and it seems like people now get a dopamine kick. People seek to tear others down, whether it's a politician, whether it's a company or a product. People are really, really into kind of tearing down. And unfortunately, the business model of the internet now is oriented around clicks and views. So creators get paid when they appeal to that bloodlust, that dopamine kick. And they know that creators are savvy. And so now every creator is a reviewer. And, reviewers vary in terms of their expertise, but they all have an opinion.
Strong one.
Strong one. And it's unsurprising that opinion is oftentimes oriented around the business model that drives how they get paid. So, we're just living at a really interesting time, and I think there's a couple of publications that tend to rise above the froth, and they long have been, and I think long will be, trusted for their judgment, for their curatorial and sort of design sense. They can kind of bring independent thinking to things, and I think it's those publications that ideally we continue to look at when we want sort of informed, reviews of something. Because reviews definitely have their value, they have their place. But yeah, it's right now there's a lot of bloodlust. It's feeling a bit like old Rome before the fall, and I don't know what to make of that, but it's definitely interesting.
I share your thoughts, and I would go as far as saying that sometimes it's a bit pathetic, the way these things are communicated. Because I mean, it might sound cliche, but from great power derive great responsibility, in a sense. So I think that it's totally legitimate to point out flaws, mistake, and false promises. The point is how that is positioned and communicated. Um, because again, uh, people very often stop at a thumbnail of a video even to make a judgment of what actually
Yeah,
the output of that uh, review is. uh, and then a couple of lines during the reviews are one that are picked. And so I think that it is just a bit irresponsible to go there and just be so clickbaity about communicating this.
yeah,
So things should be brought up when there is false promises, when there are things that are not working. They should
yeah,
be clearly emphasized. But again, I also think that reviewing a product that is like a new kind of wearable, whatever that might be, is not like reviewing a phone. It is not the same thing.
yeah,
So, or a new laptop, or I have my new speakers. That's not the same thing. You cannot treat them the same way. And the argument is often, oh, I review product for my users, so that, well, but this is not the same thing. So
yeah.
it's just very, very risky. And yeah, I like your analogy about bloodlust and circus coming from Rome. To be honest, I can picture that happening in the Colosseum.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very interesting time. But we see that, and on a certain level, it doesn't change like intrinsically. Not only why we're doing this, but also the level of attention to detail and the work ethic and the responsibilities that we have to our customers, so that if we miss the mark, and undoubtedly we have and we will in the future, that we take the time to seriously learn from it and do better next time, because we do have that responsibility. Um, but I think that hopefully, I don't know what changes this, but hopefully the culture around innovation in the modern day can sort of evolve to become more collegial, rather than so much like a gladiator fight. But it's a
We'll
funny
see.
time to live in. Yeah.
We'll see. But I wanna I just wanna end up this asking you a bit how you see these market and as well as Frame and Brian Labs evolving in the next. I don't want to say 10 years. I want to say 5 years. I want to give like a realistic 3 years view or perspective how things are gonna evolve.
I think we're gonna see a few things start to happen. We're gonna see foundation models becoming smarter than I am. Certainly, they already are, and they're going to continue to be so. Um, and I think that's going to start to really pick up speed, and you're going to have that in front of your eyes, seeing the world. So it's really hard to fathom that right now, but that can't be discounted. I think the latency is going to start plummeting. I think more and more you're going to see the cost of GPUs come down. You're going to see more and more of these models, either entirely or on a hybrid basis, be able to run locally on your phone. And so latency, and therefore the interruptibility of the dialogue with an AI assistant, is going to start to become a real thing for us. So it's going to become smarter than I am. I'm going to be able to dialogue on it on a real-time basis. And it's going to start to become more capable. So, we hear this word agent a lot, or agentic workflows. It's going to start to be able to act on things across the web. Certainly, it's going to be able to get things done for us, or fetch useful information, then take that, repackage it, and then execute on it in another corner of the web. It's going to be able to do that on a consistent and increasingly complex basis. So That'll be one thing. But as IoT begins to properly embed itself in the world around us, I'm actually excited for these agents to be able to act on the physical world. Your car, your appliances, everything around you, in a factory, a smart factory, everything around you that has compute built into it. And there's more and more of it. These agents are going to be able to, through a pair of glasses, they're going to be able to act on that stuff, to see it, to pair with it, to act on it. And so it'll start to feel like we're like Jedi wielding the Force. I'm a big Star Wars fan, unabashedly so. And we're going to start to feel like we're Jedi wielding the Force, not just what we think and what we want done digitally on the web, but also in the physical world around us, acting on that world. So, it's hard to fathom that right now, but I think the next 3 years, we're going to see those three things really pick up pace.
Absolutely. I totally agree. The perspective of that really happening and connecting in that fast pace, it's probably going to take a little longer than 3 years. My instinct tells me, but I'm pretty sure that we are going to move in that direction. But I want to thank you very much. And I want to encourage everybody that is listening here to go to the website. You will find the description and then check out Brilliant Labs and get involved in their Discord, right? And be able to start building on this open source platform that Bobak is building together with his team. Bobak, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Gabriel.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you enjoyed the conversation, remember to head to YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts for more insightful conversation revolving around XR and AI. And if you like the show, please leave a rating on Spotify. It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlights on the latest and greatest founders and creative in XR and AI. Till next time.